Welcome to 10,000 Women, 10,000 Stages. Empowering women like you to amplify your voice, your message, your movement. We believe that if 10,000 new women stepped into high-level leadership platforms, we can transform the industries across the planet. 10,000 Women, 10,000 Stages. And now your host, Narissa Street.
Hi, my goodness, you're back. Get out of town. You came back. I'm really excited that you came back. You came back to hear this podcast. You came back to watch this show. I am delighted to again be your host. You heard my name. My name is Narissa Street, in case you missed it the first time. Here's what I'm delighted about. I get to introduce you to someone who I've known for several years, but I feel lucky to know her. You're going to feel lucky to get to know her. Please listen to the story of Robyn Hankerson. Hi, how are you?
Hi, Nary. Can I say Nary, or is it Narissa officially for the
So Narissa is my given name. And so, yeah. So the Nary, as I'm being called, is my name on social media. And so I appreciate you asking either way. But this is Robyn. Robyn, tell us who you are.
Well, I am Robyn Hankerson, and I am just a child of God, first and foremost. That's just number one all day, what I lead from. But I am a woman who just is favored and has always giving back, and sharing that favor with all those around me at my core. And I think that just comes from a long lineage of my family, growing up as a child of two educators, straight from Pensacola in Georgia, my mom and dad, and, going back to when Blacks had few career paths and choices, and it was all about a village. They took that path of education, so they instilled that in me from day one. And it always manifested in the way that they would give back to those around them. We were a family that always was close-knit, had a lot of, family gatherings, major, people coming over. And we always had kids at our house. My mom always brought home the kids that she, back then you could invite kids to your house as a teacher. That's a different way. So all of that was always just at the core of who I am and who I've grown to be. So I carry that proudly as, one who has always had, and I'm grateful for that. And there was a long time where I couldn't be proud of that, but now today I am, and I, use what I have to be able to help others in any capacity that I can. So that is me, just favor.
Wow. And to be able to define yourself in that way and to recognize it, from what I know of you, seems to put a rod in your back, as we like to say. Just there's a certain confidence and just kind of like a calmness to your spirit that I always, whenever I know that you're in the room, there's always a calmness with you, which now I'm hearing as like this conscious peace, I guess is the best way to say it. Yeah. So, wow, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. So what has brought you feeling that that's what you walk with, the sense of education being valuable, this sense of now openness to your own career? Because like you said in the beginning, people didn't have the opportunities that you are able to step into, and the sense of the village. How would you say that's brought you to the work that you're doing now?
Interesting. So I think, when I was growing up, it was all about education. And, my family didn't know any other path. So my dad is a retired area superintendent for Broward Schools. My mom is a retired principal. And so when I was going to college, I was defiant that I did not want to be in education. That was just like, I'm not doing it because they did it, you know? So I didn't want to do education just because my parents did it. And I really wanted to figure out how to chart my own path. And so I still had no clue what that looked like because education was still all that I knew. So, I started off in the world of business, but my brain didn't connect the economics and the finance. It just was not a good match for me. And then I moved into the communications realm. And so when I got there and I got to learn to be more expressive and creative and just kind of see the world differently, it was a path that I enjoyed. And so it was one that I really had to create on my own, because after I got a degree in public relations, it was kind of like I didn't have anyone to say, here's a job in PR. Whereas I knew if I had stayed in education, I could have written my own ticket, just based on my family and their connections, right? I could have just, done that, obviously with hard work, by all means. That was always going to be an expectation, but I would have had someone to point me in the right direction. And I didn't have that with the PR industry. I just had to kind of figure it out. And so I think, when I fast forward and I think about, how my story began and, what was instilled in me, even though I didn't go directly the education route, it was that family connection. It was that, you have, and so help others. And so, do and give back and, be that person, be that connector, be that, be grateful, but be humble at the same time. That was always just a part of who I am. So I think those jobs that I've had and the way I landed into this industry and what I've intentionally chosen to do after going through many years in this industry and being in the position that I am now with the community relations aspect, it all kind of roots back to my foundation, people. How do you help people? And I think that's something I just always held close to me and just always saw from beginning. So I think that's just kind of that connection, going from seeing me work through and navigate on my own to, at the end of the day, now saying, every job that I have now, I'm very clear, has to be with intention of something that I care about. It's no longer just trying to find a job or get a paycheck. It's got to be something I enjoy doing.
And coming to that, I think the way that you've been able to come to that, just naturally, just allowing yourself to be led by the things that are important to you. I think people need to allow themselves that grace. It is absolutely okay to find your way through your job, and it's okay for people to pay you to discover yourself, right? So, you are taking it, you're like, I'm still working hard. I'm still doing the things that I need to do. But along the way, you figure out, okay, this is the kind of people I like to work with. This is the type of intention I want to work with. This is the purpose I work with. And, I know every place that you have gone and that you've touched, I'm sure you can return, So, I think that's a thing that speaks a lot about how we need to approach the working world. Yeah. It's okay to figure it out along the way, but you've still approached your work very much, as you said, with your family name and your family legacy in mind, so that's brilliant. And marketing, I say this all the time as somebody who's in education, marketing is just education a little louder. Right. So it's the same thing. Your mom probably already talked to you about that. So, baby girl, you in marketing, but we know you're just teaching
You're just teaching the people. You got to lead them. Lead
the people. It's all right. You don't have to call it teaching. It's okay, but we get you. You still in teaching. I'm sure you've already had that conversation.
Oh yeah, 100. My mom has always been like, I don't care what you do, you're gonna be teaching. And so it was funny because at one point I got to work in higher education, and I have to tell you, it was kind of like the calling that came all wrapped up in one. Because, while I've worked in nonprofit, I worked for a private PR and marketing agency. when I got to higher ed, it was like a light bulb turned on. And I was like, my mom was going to like, you going to get there. Okay. You might want to take the long path. You might think you're going to do this, but you're going to get there. And I'll tell you, it was probably one of my most enjoyable positions because I got to work in a higher education space, which I have a deep passion for education, but I also got to do it from the marketing and PR perspective. So telling that institution story meant a lot to me, and the institution really served mostly, majority minority students. And so that was a huge thing for me. So in that time, I really got to see myself develop because I'm like, this is my space. I worked with students. I ended up teaching while I was there and I loved it. And my mom just said, I'm like, I said what I said. And I was like, okay, Mom. I started teaching, classes, mentoring my students. And it was just like, so even now, as I pivot and grow, I still am always thinking about, where does that real heart and passion lie and how will that continue to show up? Like you said, I got paid to do that for 4 years. That was, I earned a paycheck to do something I really liked and be in a space I really like. I've transitioned, but it still, sticks in my mind because I'm always thinking about, what are you living? Are you breathing? Are you working within a space that really fills my soul? And so I'm thinking now, because I've been blessed to have had literally every job that I've ever wanted, I've been blessed to have it now. And so now I'm looking back and I think we kind of got into this, and I don't know if I should go down this path yet about the jobs that I've had, but it's kind of like God, because I remember if I rewind 10 years ago, or I guess even longer since we met, when I was working for the agency, I have a very good friend who was also in the PR and marketing industry. And he and I would always have conversations about the things that I wanted to do. And so I had 3 things on my list. I wanted to work in higher ed. I wanted to be a PIO. So that's a public information officer for a government agency, one of their spokespersons, right? And I wanted to work in a community relations role. So that was like the end of my list. Okay. That was it. That was all I had dreamed up, because in my mind, I felt like that would take me forever to accomplish. That's 3 things, right? Like those are 3 different jobs, same industry, but very different positions and very different, industries. But I guess in my mind, all I dreamed up was that it was going to take me forever to accomplish that. And so I hadn't really dreamed beyond it. So between, yeah.
Go ahead, continue.
So here I am thinking I'll be like, 50, 60 by the time I have accomplished these 3 things. So my mind hadn't gone beyond that, which brings me to a very interesting point in my life today, because in I can't even get the calendar right because I can't believe all this is happening. So in 2015, I started working in higher ed. I ended my time in higher ed in 2018. Moved to the public information officer role, 2019, and here I am in 2020 in community relations. So and I might have that timeline a little bit off, but I will say within a whole year, not calendar year, but within a year, I have touched the 3 jobs I ever wanted. And so now I'm like, what? I have no age shame. So I'm 39. So something that I envisioned that wouldn't happen until I was like 50, 60 of me being able to take all of these positions. Here I am at 39, like, whoa, wait a minute. Like now done all 3 of these jobs that you imagine would take you your whole career to do that. And you've jumped, you've made leaps, you've done things that people would look at you and have looked at you and thought that you're crazy for doing, but here you are having accomplished all those things. So now you're going, what's next?
Hey, this is a great episode, right? Want to carry the insight from our show wherever you go? Visit myjoyisvaluable.com for the best resources that we've gathered that are inspired by expert guests. Find support for your business, tools to organize your life, and more. That's myjoyisvaluable.com.
Well, I think that's very important to touch on. So first, the fact that you had written those things down as these are particular goals, and then your shifting really wasn't really about, okay, let me just check these things off the list. Your shifting was, again, following what was best for you, right? And then you look back and you're like, oh, wow, right? So there are a few things that I see from that. Number one, the journey, even though we have our plans, like you said, I figured I won't get there till I'm 50. Even though we have our plans, if we're working with soul-filled intention, as you called it, right? The universe, God, the divine, whatever we want to call it, will open the doors when they're ready to be opened, right? And it's just a matter of us connecting and listening and moving, right? So just listen and move, right? People on the outside who don't understand what's being communicated to you, in your heart, are going to say what they say. But it's a matter of, I need to move, and I think what's really great is what I know from you is that the first gig, at least when I met you, you held on to that gig. Even though the rest of us were like, you're like dope as hell, right? You could like do anything, and I think that's the other thing for us as well. Just seeing when you are dope, when you are on your game, when you are there for a purpose, then you'll be moved faster than people who settle for mediocre, right? So it's okay if the career trajectory that you have moves faster. But what's great now is along the way, I think we forget that we're learning about ourselves.
100.
So what have you learned about what's right for you as a person in the working world? What have you learned about that?
That's a good question. So one thing, and I just want to touch on that you said,
Sure.
Because you said how, you knew like, hey, Robyn, you're dope. You have other attributes. So one thing is I didn't understand that about myself.
Mm.
And me, and I think we all many times guilty of that. We don't give ourselves enough credit, and even when we hear it, we don't receive it. And so when you said that, and I remember we talked about this before, it's like, I can specifically see now how people like you and our Urban League fam was tight. So we were Urban League young professionals. We were tight, and everybody, that was a part of that circle is our movers and shakers. They're doing good things now, but it's like, I could see it in you. I could see it in, everyone around us, but I could never see it in me. And so I think there is some power in learning about yourself that when people keep telling you something, good or bad, right? You might just want to listen, right? It doesn't mean that they're right, but you may want to take it in and process it and do a little bit more with it than just, they just saying that. Oh, they just saying that, right? So I think that was one thing that I've learned, because I can now look back and be like, man, like, it all makes sense now. I was at this company for 10 years, and while I wasn't fulfilled and I wasn't happy, I still couldn't see myself. I couldn't see it. I didn't see it. But there was a reason that this company did not want me to leave. and there was a reason that God didn't move me yet, because he was like, you can't see yourself. So I can't move you nowhere because you won't even listen. You can't even see yourself. I have all these people coming to you telling you how great you are, and you ain't listening. So I can't put you in your next assignment yet because you're not going to listen to me. You know what I mean? You're not going to listen. You're not.
Lord, she done touched on all that. Look at that. But
yeah,
that's it. People wonder why they're still stuck.
Yes.
They wonder why they're still stuck. You're stuck because you don't see yourself yet.
You don't see it yet. And I think it's a ripening season. And, I love, hate to get all spiritual, but it's who I am. So it is what it is. But
Come through.
It's a ripening season. You have to, you have to go through that, because I'll tell you that 10 years that I couldn't see myself, probably the 10 years I developed the most, because I specifically remember I was at that company. I started year 9. That was my first real job out of college. I had, done a couple things, but it was my first professional position out of college. And I remember I started year 9 and I said, I won't see year 10 at this job. And literally I walked around for 6 months saying, I won't see year 10 at this job. Every time I was at events, people were like, where do you work? Oh, I work for this agency, but I won't see year 10 there. Whereas the big contrast was, you rewind, 4, 5, 6, 7 years into it, I was afraid to speak about what I wanted, because I had all these fears of, if I talk about wanting to leave the job, they're going to find out and they might fire me. And oh my gosh, right? I walked around with all this fear that I couldn't speak about what I really wanted, because I was more fearful of men, right? I was so fearful that this would be some sort of retaliation, that they knew everybody in the whole wide world, because they are, the company was very known in my industry. So I felt like, they know everyone. I'm going to be without a job, fire me. So I can't speak about it. But when something happened in me year 9, and I was like, I can't see this job. And I kept saying that. So whenever I would now talk to people, I would say it. Oh yeah, I work for this company, but I won't see year 10 there. So if you know of anything, let me know. Mm-hmm. And it was just this different level of confidence that I had that allowed me to make that transition. So at year 9.5 is when I left. And so it's just like when you start to see yourself and you begin to realize that no man or woman, right, has the authority over your life and the authority over who you are and what you can be and what's destined for you. I think you just shift how you see things. And then once I got on that train, to your point, it's like that has just been my mantra. It's like, these rules and these thoughts that were so self-limiting before about, you can't leave because this, or, even in my transitions now, you've only been at this job for, this many months or this year, you can't leave,
Laws of man. Laws of man.
Laws of man. So it's just, seeing those things that I've started to see myself more. And then, there's also that battle where you're like, okay, you don't want to see yourself too much now, right? You're like, no, don't get carried away, which, I believe that, again, just listening to, what's it created for you, you can find that balance. But I think that's what I've learned about myself. Just like, listen, have that confidence in yourself. And I work through that confidence today. I'm working in corporate America. You got to have that same confidence in those same conversations, and they don't necessarily go away. Those doubts don't go away. It's just how you learn to manage them differently that shows up. So I think those are the things I'm still learning and have learned. It's just, you are you were created uniquely and divinely. So, show up that way every day.
Yeah. Yeah. And I appreciate the thought about having balance with that as well, because, there was I can't remember the person's name, but it was a political figure, I think in Detroit. And he had risen to fame quickly because he was, just really talented, really charismatic. And then the people around him, torpedoed him. He got involved with some craziness, and I think he ended up in jail. And one of the things that when I heard about his story, Kwame Kilpatrick, I think is his name, but I have to look it up just to make sure. One of the things that it struck me about his story is he said, sometimes your character sometimes your talent will take you places your character isn't ready for. Right. And I was like, just to think about that, having what that looks like, and understanding that even though you are favored, right, and how you started, you still continue to listen, right? Just because you're favored doesn't mean you don't listen to wisdom. Doesn't mean you make sure, okay, before you take a step forward, is this the right step? You're always checking in. Am I doing the right thing? And I think for those of us who have, a lot of talent, or ambition, it is always good to, let me just check in. Let's make sure that it's not just me thinking that this is the way we need to go. And on the other side of that, though, is learning to distinguish between the voice of, okay, well, let me pump the brakes on this, and no, you're just scared.
Exactly.
So how do you balance that? What are you scared of? And what are you doing to move through those kinds of things?
So I am notoriously scared of making mistakes. I know it's trite. I know it's just everyone's mistakes, but it is just oh my God. And I think, that stems from a lot of things, that 10 years or that 9.5 years, professionally, that 9.5 years was very focused on mistakes. So when you made a mistake, it was like the end of the world. It was like you were going to get reamed out for it. And so I think that made me overly cautious. Professionally. I think that also, was an impact in, my personal life. And personally, it's just oh, you want to do the right thing. I grew up, with 2 educators. They knew everybody. So I couldn't use a bathroom without my dad already knowing that I went to the bathroom. I'm like, dang, So it was you always had to. I went to middle school where my mom had worked for 15 years. She left literally the year before I started going to school there, which was a godsend, because I was like, I ain't trying to go to school where my mom works. But and then my dad, the high school that I went to, he literally he left there as a principal the year before I started. So I got saved in the way that I never had to actually be at school while they were working there. But there was this long history of them being in these places that I always had to live up to, So it was I couldn't be a normal kid. I couldn't just do goofy stuff in the hallway, because the first thing any teacher, my mom worked at my middle school for 15 years. So the first thing, I'm gonna call your mom. so I think
preacher's kid.
Right. It's like a preacher's kid, right? We need a phrase for the teacher's kid.
Teacher's kid.
Stuff, man. So I'm gonna call your mom. And it's I had to fix everything. If there was something that happened and it was my friend who got in a fight, you should have helped. You should have stopped. I'm like, that ain't me fighting. I knew better than to get in the fight, So it was always you always had to be good, because you didn't want to make your mom or your dad look bad. So you couldn't make mistakes. I couldn't just live. So I had a thing of being really good at school, and I was really bad at home because I knew better. I knew better.
Right.
So I was a really good kid. I couldn't make mistakes. I couldn't, just do what I did then. So it was personally, I had that as just a kid growing up. You always got to do the right thing. When your parents look bad, And then, when I finally go to college, which was hallelujah, because I went to University of Florida, and, my family had all went to FAMU, which is where I had intended on going, but that's a whole other story. So when I went to UF, it was oh my God, no one knows me.
Right.
No one can call my mom or my dad.
Right.
If I had gone to FAMU, that would have been the case. They knew everybody.
Right.
So it was
yeah, you got a chance to stretch.
I can breathe.
Yeah.
So the whole new me of you can make mistakes. You do, live. But I think that was always ingrained. So I think that fear personally had already been there from just, family, right?
Right.
Then professionally, it was like, ooh, you're in deep trouble if you make a mistake professionally. So I think that just always is a fear that even now I work on.
We create the professional spaces that mirror our families. So, that doesn't surprise me. If you were in a space where your family dynamic was, don't screw this up, there's a legacy, then we tend to go into jobs that match our family dynamic. And so I've been doing a lot of work around with I've actually been developing a workshop around the recovering good girl. Like those of us who have this space of, I had to be right all the time, and so I can only imagine. So then to counter that, what's the best mistake you've made?
The best mistake I've made?
The best mistake you made. It's one of the questions I ask in the workshop, just to kind of like get people like, because you're like, as I say, and as you know this, I think you're very dope. So like, oh gosh, Nikki Giovanni, I think. I'm so hip, even my errors are correct. So it's like walking in that. So what's the best mistake you've made?
Dang, that's a good one. The best mistake. I don't know. I would probably have to say that I don't know. You got me stumped. I'm trying to think I try to give people the boyfriend that, thank God he didn't ask you to marry him, or you bought the car and you turn left and you're supposed to go right. You got into an accident, but then you got a better car. So like those kinds of at the moment, one of my best mistakes, I actually also went to University of Florida and I failed my first semester. That was actually one of the best mistakes I made. So yeah, one of my good mistakes. So you went right to what I was thinking.
Yeah, so like that. So yeah,
I was like, oh, that's just exactly what I was thinking. So I think, well, it's kind of the same vein. I think for me, trying to avoid this world of education, choosing business. Choosing business as a major. I was always a good, a decent writer, right? I didn't love literature and English from that perspective, but I liked writing papers. It's so weird. It's my thing. I liked writing papers. I liked to do the research to write papers. And so for me to choose business, and completely fail. Like I was a gifted kid in school. I was in gifted classes, AP honors. So I was that kid, it was just like school was easy, And when I went to UF, I think that was my first time really being challenged. And so I chose business, like I said earlier, just to get away from education. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't know what I was going to do with business, but it just seemed like my dad was like, well, it's a logical degree.
Right.
So I took the logical path. And I'll tell you, I have never seen so many C's in my report card in my entire life.
That's great.
Jesus,
what's that letter? What is that letter? Oh my God, that's a C.
The wrong report card. Like, this ain't my report card. I don't act like this. And so I think that, I think it made me have to find myself. It was like the first time I didn't have, mom and dad. College is just a transformative experience in general. But I think it was the first time I had to really figure out what I wanted to do. And I think those failures in, my first year when I was like, I'm going home, I just can't do this anymore. The classes are too big. I think when I finally, and the only reason I found my major in communications was because that little thing that turned back on when I remembered them talking about personality assessments. And I did go, I remembered them when you were at preview, eons ago. So I didn't change my major until my junior year, which is crazy. So I knew for 2 years that I was doing the wrong major, but I didn't know how to get out. I didn't know what to do. Darren Lee said, you have 4 years. 4. So I'm in year 2 now. My grades are just not good. But I made I'd gone to do the personality assessment, and teacher came up as one of them, and I was still defiant. I was like, I'm not being a teacher. I already told you that. I'm not doing it. So I ignored it still. And then it had public relations as another profession. So I switched to that major. So I think choosing business made me really, have to struggle. For 2 years, I hated school, and I had never hated school before. For 2 years, I struggled. I didn't know how to get through it. And then when I finally got and changed my major, it was like the gates opened up. The gates opened up. So I was able in 2 years to change, pull my GPA back up and just completely blossom because of me choosing, that business degree and then changing my mind and going to the communications route. So
that's awesome. That's awesome. I'm so, grateful for that, because then, the organizations that you were able to touch along the way, and at some point we're going to get you back into education. The teachers, I ran from teaching for a full decade until God cut off all of my money. I said,
you're going to go do this.
You're going to do this one. just stop it. Yeah. We're going to look, an open job, and it's a teaching job, and you're qualified. Like, okay, I guess. So we'll get you back at some point.
Oh, I want it. Well, on the higher ed side, I don't think I can go.
That's fine. We'll take it wherever it comes.
Yeah, that is like that was probably one of the most enjoyable things. I tell you, working in the classroom with those students. I loved my students.
You see the lights pop open. You see the lights come on. When you get it, when you see you're like, and they're like, oh. And they're like, I can figure that out. You're like, oh, wait a second. This is.
Wait. I did that. I helped them get there.
I did that. Yes.
I did that. Yeah, it's beautiful. I have, like I said, a deep place in my heart for teachers and educators of any way, shape, and form. And, that time I got to do it, I taught for, I want to say like 3 semesters. Mm-hmm. I taught, and I loved it. I loved it.
Yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful calling. And what I'm working on right now is changing the dynamic around the idea of education as a career. So hopefully it'll be at some point when we finish with this paradigm shift in the world, we will welcome you in. And you'll be making tons of money as well. So,
money is good, but purpose and intention are priceless.
It is. Yeah. You're right. You're right. So here's a tactical question. I always like to give my audience tactics, and then we'll wrap up. So you are public relations, marketing, and one of the things that people who are making the move forward and starting to amplify their voice, not only is there a concern about making mistakes, but making mistakes in public, right? So how do you handle public failure? Like you took a step out, dumpster fire. So what is the way to step into that? Have you ever had one of those of your, have you ever had your own public failure? And how do you I stepped out there, I took a risk, it's a dumpster fire, everybody's watching. What do I do?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, great.
So here's the thing. So my dumpster fire, the thing is, I didn't allow it to become overwhelming. Because I'm like, I've gotten to a place where I'm like, and I teach this a lot with, PR and communications, right? The whole thing is about this bell curve, right? So you're going to have something that's going to happen. It is going to hurt. At the end, you're going to recover if you choose. So, I always talk about the story of Michael Vick, and Judy Smith was his publicist, which is the show Scandal was based off of her. And yeah, awesome story, from a communication standpoint. So Olivia Pope is all about this person. And she talked about, I heard her talk once, and she talked about the story of Michael Vick. And as his publicist, how she told him, what's your end goal? And he's like, I want to play football again. Like he knew that he may not be the most well-respected player per se, but his personal end goal was he wanted to play football again. So after all of the media, things that were out there about him, he got to his end result, which is to play football again. And so I think I take that as my mantra of life. So my dumpster fire is the peak, but I have the choice on how and when I'm ready to move forward. And so that's what I always, preach to people. Like you're going to have the bell curve. It's like social media is like that. Something's going to happen. One person's going to tweet it, retweet it. And the next thing you know, you're trending. So for us, that it's not necessarily, we're not a trending topic. For us in our lives, it's a trending topic, right? When we in our lives, it's a trending topic. We may not be trending on Twitter, but we're trending in our lives and in our circles. So we're going to hit our trending topic, but as every situation does, you see it just come back down a hill and it becomes less of a conversation. So what I try to do is shorten my bell curve, So when I make a mistake, I try to get over the process of blaming myself for it. It happened. I can't turn back the clock. It's done. It's here. We're in it. And then from there, I work on acceptance. Like, okay, you messed up and you messed up bad and you need to own it. Own it. Just own it. Like the quicker you own it and can have that real talk with yourself, the quicker this is going to be, over, that you're able to accept what's next for you. And then I, work towards moving on. So I think that's for me, my dumpster fire. I try not to let them, it's a dumpster fire. It don't have to be, scorching of the earth. And I think a lot of times that's our mistake. We let it scorch our whole earth. We make a mistake. It's a dumpster fire. You can put it out, but we like, nope, the whole earth is over. Forget it. It's all done. And I don't operate from that aspect. I operate from solutions. I operate from progress. I operate from moving forward. So I think that has served me well. I don't know that someday I might hit that milestone of something that I am not, but in 39 years, that has just been my theme, because at the end of the day, you are covered. So whatever was intended for you to go through it. And everything, when I look back, that I've been through has put me here. So I just kind of think that life will, it'll rebound. It's just how long that you're gonna, allow this to take over. So that's my thing to people. Just, I know it's hard because you may have to seek help. You may need therapy. You may need, some time alone. You may need whatever you need, but it's really you driving that ship. And that's the ship that I drive. I'm the captain of my fate, the captain of my soul. Like it's me. So that's how I, try to share with people. And that's how I try to deal with my dumpster fires. Cause I definitely have had questions that I've had to look in the face and be like, all right, you did that. So what you gonna do now?
That's brilliant. Cause I think that's the thing, is you talk about the dumpster fire versus scorched earth. Like, I think that's it. A lot of times we are in it, and because you're right up under the fire and you can smell and feel the heat, you're like, oh, it's over. You like, just take some steps back. As you're saying, what's the goal? Walk away from the fire, just kind of look and say, okay, it's not so bad. All right, let's put this out. Let's own it. Let's figure it out and move forward. So thank you. That's a really great tactic to move us forward. So I am, again, delighted that you were able to find some time and off of your schedule and chat with us during the holiday season. I am loving your Christmas tree, by the way.
My little cards on there, it's all about friends and fam. I'm like, send me a card so I can add it to my tree.
That's actually a great idea. Usually my cards are like along the wall, but I like the idea of putting the card on the tree. That's That's nice. Oh my gosh, I'm very, very grateful. So once again, delighted. If people wanted to connect with you and follow your amazing adventures as the voice of important organizations across our community, where can we find you?
So I'm on Twitter at Robyn Hankerson, RobynHankerson. And I'm on Instagram at Charisma9, and that's CHARIZMA9. So
Thank you.
I'm using them, learn about my wine, my love for wine and everything else, and what's happening in the community.
Folks, I've been following her Insta with her love for wine. I saw how you were celebrating the holiday, and I need this in my life next year. This is what I'm saying. This is exciting. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me, Narissa. I really appreciate it, and I hope this was valuable. And it's, like I said, just know who you are, right? Just know who you are.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to 10,000 Women, 10,000 Stages. Share this episode with someone who needs it. Find us at 10,000women10,000stages.com.